Audioversity, the voice of Reichman University.
כל האוניברסיטה אודיוversity. I'm close to Lebanon here. I thought maybe it's going to happen. Some Lebanese will come and want to kill me. So they'll kill me or they won't kill me. And the truth is, from a bigger place, I could look the guy in the eyes and say, look, you can kill me or come and have a cup of tea and we'll talk about it.
Welcome to Raw, a podcast where we confront the complexities of war from the inside out. I'm Anouk, a journalist, author, yoga teacher, and meditation practitioner. Raw, or war spelled backwards, symbolizes how many of us feel in the face of the Israel-Gaza conflict, exposed, vulnerable, and seeking understanding. Here, we don't just discuss the external battles, but dive deep into our internal struggles, examining how this violence has shaken our very core. Join me in conversations with philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual leaders as we explore how to navigate these painful times with wisdom and resilience, finding guidance for our own paths through this raw, unfiltered world. My guest today is Stephen Fulder, founder and senior teacher of Tovana, the largest meditation society in Israel. Stephen was born in London in 1946, educated at Oxford University, and has a Ph.D. in molecular biology. He's been practicing Buddhism and meditation for 45 years, including years in India. Stephen has been teaching classes, groups, and retreats intensively for 30 years. He's had 16 books published, including the bestseller Arot, Bחיי, היומיום, or What's Beyond Mindfulness, Waking Up to This Precious Life, and The 5 Powers. He's the founder of the Middleway organization and has been actively engaged in peace and ecological work in the Middle East. He's also one of the founders of the beautiful ecological village of Clil in the Western Galilee. Stephen, I feel so honored and privileged to be speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm also honored and privileged and delighted to be part of this, delighted to have my voice out there and delighted to talk to you.
The listeners won't have heard this, but since you're a meditation teacher, I just asked you to guide me through a very short 2-3 minute practice. And I'm so glad I did. I came here, as usual, in the rush of the day with the kids and with the traffic and the worry about the news and the worry that I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, all these voices inside my head. And you just guided me through such a simple yet powerful practice. And that is why meditation means so much to me and to so many people. So thank you, first of all, for that. I'd like to start with this quote, which I'm sure you know, by Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, and he was a Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. In his words, between the stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and power to choose our responses. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. If I could sum up the impact that mindfulness and meditation has had on my life, I would keep going back to that quote. And I'd like to give you an example from just a few days ago when that space that Viktor Frankl talks about really manifested itself quite powerfully in my life. I came home after a long day of work. I have 3 young children, and my eldest, Leo, who's 8 years old and who is a delightful child, was in one of his very combative moods where everything was no. And I was asking him to go get ready, and it was no, and he was getting more and more what I felt was rude and belligerent. And at some point I raised my voice and I said, Leo, you're going to get ready right now for bed. And he took a blanket and he screamed no, and he put the blanket on my head. And in that moment, my instinctual primal reaction, and this is quite hard to say, but what I felt was that I wanted to hit him. And I'm so grateful for my meditation practice, because we're not going to go into that, but I have, like many people, some history of trauma from my childhood, and perhaps also genetically some disposition to anxiety and fear of being disrespected. And if it had not been for that space, me, who I think of as a loving, caring mom, might have done something that would have been completely out of my control. And yet in that moment, I had that space, and I realized that Leo was at the end of a very long day, that he'd had a vaccine at school that day. And I kind of gathered myself and I looked at him and I said, Leo, I will not allow you to put a blanket on my head. I'm going to come with you, and together we're going to go get ready for bed. And I said that in a way that was authoritative, but not rageful. And something beautiful happened, which is what so often happens when I respond this way to my kids, is they just completely melt. I feel like there is a gratitude that I didn't lose my temper, and that I see them. I see their exhaustion. I see their need to have a little tantrum. The reason I'm saying this is because we're here to talk about the war. And on October 7th, what was so felt in my body was that I had no longer any control over my visceral reactions. I lost that space on October 7th, and for the many days that followed, that Viktor Frankl talked about, I was completely gripped by terror and by probably transgenerational trauma coming from my grandparents and the Holocaust. And I was terrified and rageful, and I felt like a persecuted child. And so what I'm curious, because you've been doing this meditation thing for so many more years than I, and you are the guru in Israel and one of many in the Western world. How was October 7th for you, and were you able to keep some spaciousness in your body and in your psyche?
Yeah, thank you. Great question, and a beautiful little story. We are very contracted when we are faced with the threat, that it feels very immediate and strong and traumatic. We get very, very contracted and very one-tracked. We get reactive and responsive, and their space is lost. In my own case, on October the 7th, I felt a huge pain, and the pain was palpable, was touchable. It was as if there was a huge weight inside, and I felt the pain of the young people who were being slaughtered and who had been slaughtered, and the cruelty, and I felt it as a huge pain. What I needed to do is take a couple of days, which I did, before I could talk to anybody. I took a couple of days of being at home quietly, but I would say that having years and years of spiritual experience, that was built in. The meditation, and not just the meditation, the wisdom and the books I've read and the books I've written, that's built in. So that the trauma needs to take over. And the way it does that is to reduce the person into a rather small slice. What stands against being reduced into a reactive, angry, revengeful, immediate, violent response, what prevents that is not to forget that we are big people. And for my own personal experience, this is built in. I cannot be anymore in that contracted place. There can be somebody that will come to my door with a gun. And I actually thought maybe it's going to happen I'm close to Lebanon here. I thought maybe it's going to happen. Some Lebanese will come and want to kill me. So they'll kill me or they won't kill me. And the truth is, from a bigger place, I could look the guy in the eyes and say, look, you can kill me or come and have a cup of tea and we'll talk about it. Because there is always another way. And that's Viktor Frankl's comment there. There's always another way. And it depends on us returning to ourselves. So what I was doing after the 2 days when I really felt I had to kind of absorb that, what was happening, and feel it and be with the pain in my heart and let it be there, I said, now I'm ready to go out and talk to people. And basically what I would tell people and help people in the community is, okay, don't blame yourself for feeling the anger and the trauma and the revenge. Don't add to it blame, but also remember that you're bigger than that. And look at yourself and say, yes, we have major trauma here, but still we are big people.
I wonder if my mother would be okay with me sharing this story. I think she would. She was in Argentina on October the 7th and came and went to Paris a few days afterwards. And she's a child of Holocaust survivors. And when she stepped into her hotel and saw that some of the people working there were Arab speaking, she went into a complete panic, which is not rational. And she went in her hotel room and she hid inside the closet. She was that terrified. My mother is quite theatrical, so there might have been an element of drama there. But I think there was a real terror, a terror of a second Holocaust happening again. And in those moments, it is so difficult for anybody maybe who isn't Stephen Fulder to recognize that fear and to remember that we're larger than that. And so I wonder if in these last few weeks, in these last few months, do you find it harder to talk to people about compassion and about common humanity?
Absolutely. And there's no guarantee you can be practicing 20 years. The fear is such primal. We have it in our biological basis. Fear and insecurity is fundamental to life. We're born in a body, and what our major concern after that is survival. So never mind you've been doing meditation 10 years. In such a situation, the fear is palpable. But what is there is that there's always a question when there's when you look at fear as suffering and say, right, what is the actual experience right now? It's fear, and I am afraid, and I have genetic fear, and I have Jewish fear, and I have this fear. Okay, be there with that fear, honestly, at eye level, and then be there with the tendency to build out of that fear another level of reactivity of thoughts. That's a second step. So that the first step is acknowledging fear. And I never say to people, you've been meditating, you shouldn't have fear. What I do say is, okay, you're meditating, look at the fear and watch what we build out of the fear. And this is a voice that is possible. You may not have it so strongly, but it is possible. And for example, this woman came to me and said, I feel so good here in Clil, and there's olive trees outside, and I feel the earth underneath, and I walk in the trees, and I feel my big spirit there and happy. And then all of a sudden the fear arises, and I see a plane going over, an F-16 going over us here in the north, and I hear the booms of the artillery, which are not very far away, a few kilometers away. And all of a sudden I feel so contracted. How do I put the two worlds together? And I said, you don't need to try and fit them together. They don't fit together, but be your fully happy big self when you can, and watch the fear coming in as an experience. Give it its space, give it its authenticity, meet it as it is. It doesn't have to undo you. It's an experience. As Etty Hillesum once said, if you give these feelings the space that they ask for, you are actually still back in life.
For those who don't know meditation and mindfulness very well, there is this analogy of the ocean and the waves, that we are the ocean that can carry the various waves of life, the various internal waves of sorrow and grief and rage and anger and joy and happiness and contentment and frustration. And we don't have to be swept up in each wave. We can learn to be the ocean, watching the waves come and go.
That's fine. Yeah, that's a good image. And of course, if you actually think for a moment, and what's been happening since October the 7th is people have been coming back to themselves, and they have returned, and they're beginning to ask questions. And I think the questions are crucial here, because like in the spiritual tradition, big pain gives you two choices. One is misery, and the other is search. The narratives on both sides, the narratives that are fueled by the insecurity, are making sure that another war happens and another war happens and another war happens. And that's been the way it's been all these years. I was here in 1973 at the Yom Kippur War. That's 50 years ago. I was right in the middle of Tel Aviv when the war broke out. Nothing has changed. We have to find another way, and there are other ways. I've seen minimal, distant dialogues between politicians that anyway full of suspicion, and they just go back home and say the others are not listening. I don't see any real dialogue. And yet, here in the Galilee, where I'm living, daily life dialogue is happening, and we are fine with our Arab neighbors and the Druze neighbors, Christians, Muslims, Jews, a city together, living together in the Galilee. It's so easy. It's possible, you know. And when I meet my Arab neighbors here, they say they agree with the point that I'm making. It doesn't need you to be a meditation teacher. The narratives are toxic. And the guy that delivered the gas the other day, he said, my narrative is to say history is just destructive. What's important is that I have food in my house. My family are okay. I have work, and I have a future, and I have hope living here in the Galilee with you, with Jews and Arabs and Druze together. And it's daily life, and we are fine.
For people who are not in this world and are faced with a barrage of terrifying stories, whether it comes from the news or from social media, which creates such polarity, and we know that social media feeds off people continuing to be in an echo chamber where they just get fed what they want to hear, and which confirms their own beliefs. And I noticed this. I did some experimentation with my social media. If I was looking for pro-Palestinian content, the next day I was getting a lot of pro-Palestinian content. If I was looking for pro-Israeli content, which didn't make me feel better, it made me feel like I'm validated, I'm right, I am persecuted, and therefore I'm right in feeling that that we are correct in our path. I just get fed this diet of separation, what would you say is something that people can do who don't, practice meditation daily, what is something that they can do in order to, first of all, feel more at ease? Because it's such a difficult space to be in, to consume the news, but then to feel guilty when you don't consume the news.
I believe that everybody has a little window, and this little window of, you can say, a small candle burning in the light that will say, wait a minute, what's the food I'm being fed? Maybe they can't say it 100%, but they maybe can say it 10%. What is it I'm being fed with? And is it a diet that agrees with me? And does it give me indigestion? So meditation, one of the gifts of meditation is that it helps us to see where our attention is hijacked, and to be able to win back our attention, to say, I want to give my attention to what is nutritious and helpful and wholesome for me and for my family and for my community. So meditation certainly will help, but other people who don't meditate can also have that. My grandchildren sometimes come along and say, I can't take all of this stuff. It is so much. I'm getting brainwashed. They say it themselves. There's a little voice in us that says maybe we have to kind of ask, who is stealing our attention and taking it? And do we have any attention left to be able to look at things differently? And that's a question that we need to ask all the time. What is it that we're feeding?
Do you feel there is a moral obligation to be aware of all the suffering? And just speaking from personal experience, like I mentioned, I have 3 young children. I'm busy. I live in Tel Aviv, so apart from the occasional, siren in the beginning, it is possible for me to live in a way that I go about my daily life. I bring my kids to school, I work, I study, I feel joy, I walk in the park. And yet I know that there is, at the same time, so much suffering on the part of the families who still have hostages in Gaza, who are worried about them night and day, who are hearing stories about the unimaginable physical, mental, sexual violence and torture that they're going through. The families of the soldiers who are fighting, and the thousands and thousands of families in Gaza who have no homes, who have barely anything to eat, who have lost children. Do I have a moral obligation?
I think we can change the word moral obligation to moral sensitivity, and that to be aware of suffering is certainly crucial for us. We cannot shut the door and live in 5-star hotel and say, I'm shutting the world out. And just simply because as sensitive, open human beings, it is there. To shut out suffering would be shut ourselves in another kind of prison. But I have to say, this is important in relation to your story of your life in Tel Aviv and my story of my life in Clil. There is nothing wrong with being happy. We can be happy with our children, with the nature, with our life. I'm very happy. I'm having a really happy life. But at the same time, it isn't at the expense of shutting the door to suffering. So we can actually be with the two voices, with all the, in fact, I would say we need to be happy. We need to be, live a full, happy life and be aware of suffering at the same time. There's no point in you, for example, saying, I can't be happy. I have to have a miserable life because of what's happening, the suffering out there. I will give hell to my children and my family and myself, and I won't sleep at night, and I'll be agitated all day, and I'll give myself and everybody a hard time, and I'll get sick because of it. There's no point in that. Lead a happy life, but be open to the pain around us and let the pain tell us what to do. Keep a small flame burning. And a small one candle can light up a room that's been dark for 1,000 years. We need to keep a small flame burning. And so whatever we can do, whatever is our circle, whatever power we have, we all have our powers. We are, I wouldn't say obliged, but in a natural way, we are called. And I would put it, that language feels better to me. The suffering will call us. We are sensitive human beings. We do need to feel that suffering. We do need to know the pain. And it touches me deeply when I feel, the children in Gaza and the children and the young people that were killed and are now traumatized Israelis on the other side. They touch me. My heart hurts, but at the same time, I have a happy life. But that pain inside me calls me. And whatever, in a natural way, your heart is telling you, you have to go and do it.
Your description just now reminded me of a description of Leonard Cohen, the singer, by Catherine Ingram after he died. And she said of him, Leonard's special genius was his ability to communicate both the sorrow and the beauty of the world, even in the same sentence. He never looked away from either, not even in his final months when pain racked his body. He had a twinkle in one eye and a tear in the other.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. It reminds me of this old from the Hasidim, from the Orthodox tradition phrase that said every person should have in his right pocket and his left pocket a little note. In one pocket says, I am nothing, I am just dust and ashes. And the other pocket, the note should say, I am the universe, I am the world, I am important. And I have to say personally, I live in coexisting points of view that are just as you said. I mean, I support that and I feel that very much in my own life. I can cry when I feel the pain of a child, a wounded child, and yet I'm laughing at the joy of my life these days. Never mind the age and the body and the Palestinians and the Lebanese over the border, the Hezbollah, and the diseases and the viruses and the conflicts. But at the same time, life is so beautiful and precious, and in the moment, it's a dance. The cells of my body are dancing, and my dog is dancing with me outside when we go for walks. And the life is also a dance at the same time.
That's beautiful, and I love this image of a dance. And I actually have been doing quite a lot of dancing with my children in the last few months. I think more than ever before, and in a way, the deep suffering and horror is calling on us to dance with tears in our eyes and with gratitude for what we have. And while we know what others have lost, I wonder, how do you live knowing that by the time you're gone, the world may continue in this cycle of endless violence, as someone who has lived their whole life trying to wake people up to the sameness and the beauty of all human beings?
By not trying to be in control. We're not in control. Things are much bigger than us. One of my granddaughters recently said, I'm quite happy, never mind everything that's happening, because life is stronger than us. And life will be there even if human beings wipe themselves out through global warming. And life will just keep going. And there's something in the big picture which is very supportive, which is we are not in control. I think we have a purpose in life, which is to bring meaning and joy and goodness where we can, but to let go of the sense of it has to stop, there has to be a change, it all has to finish. I can't change the world. We're not God. So we offer what we can to the world and let go and sleep well at night. That's the only thing we can do. We are not in control. I cannot guarantee anything, either for myself or for my grandchildren or for my children, or I cannot guarantee what will happen tomorrow. But what I can do is, in the moment, the joy of giving and helping and reducing suffering is in the moment. It's not about trying to control the future. It's in the moment. And the moment is enough. It feels right to live like that. And I think we have to go back home in a way and say, this is your one day. How are you going to live this one day? And what feels right in this one day? And that's it. And then you go home and sleep well at night.
For those of us also who feel so powerless in the larger decision-making of what is happening, what you're talking about, kindness, is so easy to do in our immediate circles. Being kind to our neighbor and being kind to our family and being kind to people on social media, being kind to the people that we are meeting and who we are connecting with, I believe plants the seeds for them to be kind to others. So that's kind of what I'm left with in this great difficulty and this feeling of that I started with of not good enough because I can't fix this. There is something in every moment which I can fix, which is to smile to the person walking down the street who might be going through tremendous difficulty. And all of us are going through tremendous difficulty these days. And I think that just simple acts of kindness goes such a long way in repairing and healing what has been broken.
If you're really deep in the spiritual life, and your kindness will go endlessly to the end of the world. But I understand in the humanness of us, our kindness is limited, but our obligation would be to move it one more step all the time, to move one more circle of kindness, to push the boundary of our kindness one more step and reduce the sense of protection, shield, reactivity and defensiveness. One more step of kindness wherever we can.
Stephen, thank you so much for speaking with me, for sharing your wisdom, for your beautiful smile, which people can't see, but which is full of joy and kindness and compassion and youthfulness and gratitude, and which is really contagious. So you have shared your kindness with me, and for that I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed it, being with you here.
Thank you for listening. This has been Raw. To listen to more of our episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. I'm Anouk Glory. Goodbye.